Oh, let's cross fingers.
Okay, there we go. We are live.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the fourth and final VJAX session with Antonio Goncalves and his book, Beginning Java E7. This is the continuation of the last few Hangouts, and as you probably know, if you were following the last Hangout, we had some technical issues, so that's why we're doing this fourth session. So with me, we have Antonio and Ivan. I guess they don't need introductions, but let's hear them for them.
Hello, I'm Antonio, Java EE guy. Very disappointed that the Google Hangout crashed. So that means that even companies that are really good at cloud can still improve a little bit. So here we are for a fourth and last Java EE book reading session.
Awesome. Ivan?
Yeah, my name is Ivan Ivanov. I'm working for SAP, and I'm also one of the leads of the Bulgarian Java user group, with which we have adopted JSR hackathon in just an hour and so. And we are going to adopt a Java EE8 technology, JCache, which is not really new, but anyway.
Awesome. Yeah, and myself, I'm Roberto. I work for Tommy Tribe. I'm mostly working with Java EE stuff as well, so I'm very excited about all these sessions that we've been doing. And yeah, let's start. Before going into the discussion, you guys can follow us on Twitter. Send your questions over Twitter. Go to our website on virtualjug.com. Join us on RC over there. I'm monitoring our RC channel, and you can post live questions that we're happy to relay them to Antonio. So last session we had topics around JSF, JSON, XML. We already covered JSF. So what we are missing over the topics that we have, Ivan?
I think, well, we covered most of the topics, but we just touched them, and yeah, we can dig further, I guess, in Jax-Rs. At least this is what I remember that we didn't.
Oh yes, Jax-Rs, like the spec that everyone loves right now, right?
Yeah, I think that's the one of the best specs ever created by the Java EE groups. So what's your opinion?
JPA is not bad.
Yeah, I said one of the best, not the best. JPA is one of them as well.
What about
yeah,
Corva? Isn't Corva the best?
Opinion about this? Yeah, Corva, I think it's not JSF. It's more ISO. So what's your opinion about the whole spec, the Jax-Rs? Let's start with that.
Well, it's true that it's a very nice spec. I've heard plenty of legends on this spec. One legend being that Roy Fidling, the father of the entire REST architecture, one legend says that Roy Fidling was part of the expert group at a very early stage. And so at the beginning of the 1.0, I even wonder, I think there's still his name on the spec. And a few months after he left, saying, you don't know what REST is. So I don't know if it's true or if it's not true, if it's a legend or not, but that's what I've heard. Like everything, you know, Jax-Rs is an API. So, you know, you have an API versus a RESTful architecture, which is several concepts. You know, Jax-Rs is just an API to expose servers. Like Java is an object-oriented language, and you can create non-object, you know, applications. So Jax-Rs is just an API. It's not because you do Jax-Rs that you are creating a RESTful, you know, application. But it's a very nice API. I have to say that it started quite, you know, kind of a clumsy way, because for a long time Jax-Rs 1.0 and 1.1 didn't have a client API. So it's like, you know, it's like creating RMI and you say, well, this is a stub, but we don't have clients, sorry. Or SOAP, you know, this is the way you'll expose a SOAP web service, but there's no way to invoke it. So I always find it a bit strange, and I don't know why. I don't know the history behind it. But we had to wait till Jax-Rs 2.0 to have a standard API to invoke REST service. And you know, another history behind Jax-Rs. In Java EE6, it wasn't part of the web profile. So there was a lot of votes. I was in the expert group. I was part of the people who voted no, because it was very early and we didn't know what was going to happen. So in Java EE6, there was already Jax-Rs 1.0. 1.1, sorry. But it wasn't part of the web profile because the expert group thought, hey, you know, let's wait and see. Let's wait one more version and see if it's a good spec, if it's used, and if yes, let's put it where it should belong, the web profile. So that's why Jax-Rs 2.0 had a client API plus was introduced in the web profile.
So now you agree with Jax-Rs becoming part of the web profile on Java E7?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's not that the expert group didn't agree. I think always the problem with a spec is when you take a decision on version X, is gonna follow you for many, many, many years. So sometimes people are a bit, let's wait and see. You know, there's nothing. Brian Gertz was saying a few weeks ago that in the optional API, he should have named the method get something else. But now it's too late. You know, that's one of those things is when you create a spec, when you put something into the language or in an API, it's there for a long time. So if you make a mistake, it's going to be there for a long time. So I think, you know, it's not that the expert group didn't agree. It was more, let's wait and see.
Don't mention optional in conjunction with Jax-Rs because Roberto is getting angry at the moment.
I'm not getting angry at the moment. I just feel that optional should have if not present or like if absent or something. That's all.
Yeah. Okay.
But actually, it's going to be introduced in Java 9, so I was not that wrong actually.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll have to wait to Java EE9 to have this feature supported in Jax-Rs.
Oh wow! I think I'm gonna go
not in Jax-Rs. Anyway, I'm not sure whether I asked this question last time, or please tell me if I did.
I think we didn't talk about Jax-Rs.
Yeah, we haven't talked about Jax-Rs, so please go ahead.
So every time I read a book on Java or Jax-Rs, I read something new, and this time I found the Jax-Rs filters and interceptors. So could you please, Antonio, explain us the difference? And when would you use a filter and when would you use an interceptor?
I wrote this fantastic book many, many years ago, and now I don't even remember if I talk about interceptors and filters. I wonder if I do, actually.
You do.
Yes, I do. God, what a fantastic book.
Yeah.
I recommend it. Yeah, it can be confusing, filters and interceptors, because both filters and interceptors can be used on both sides, client or service. So there's no specificity here. The thing is, a filter has access to the entire request and response. So a filter can do, anything. It can change headers, it can change MIME types, but it can also change the content of the entity, the body. And interceptors do not have access to the request or the response. They only have access to the body, to the entity. So, you will use a filter to say, if the status code is 404, then change it to 305. And you will use an interceptor saying, oh, I received this entity and I'm gonna zip it or unzip it. So really, filters, you have access to the entire HTTP request and response, and interceptors, you only have access to the entity. That's roughly the main differences.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to do some of those works using Interceptor, even though, like, using like an indirect way, if you return a response instead of like an entity, you're able to like change the status code on the response. Plus, if you inject the servlet response and the servlet request on the method that you're intercepting, then you're also able to get the request and the response on the interceptor. So it's kind of like sometimes it's a little bit confusing when to use one or the other, even though I do understand your explanation, but you're able to also do it with interceptors, though like in an indirect way.
Yeah, it's just easier to have filters, but it's true that it's confusing. But in a rule of thumb, filters, the API is easier to manipulate request and response. But yeah.
The thing with filters is that usually for me it's easier to use a filter when you're doing like some kind of authorization stuff, because then you're able to like cut down the method execution right away, and it's like the filter is like the first thing to be executed before anything else.
Yeah, so, that's a good point too. Filters are the first thing that are triggered. So yeah. It's better to do it the very, as soon as you can, basically.
In a priority way, if you, for instance, are trying to like call an endpoint that you know that interceptors are being executed and you're not able to change the interceptors or have to be there, you can always put a filter on top of it and override the priority, so to say, but not exactly, but.
One thing that we had in mind, but again, this is me talking about the bright future of Java EE 9, 10, 11, is there's a priority in the interceptors in CDI. And one of the ideas was to use this priority in the entire platform, not just CDI interceptors, but also servlet filters, servlet Jax-Rs filters and so on. That would have been a nice way to say, look, we have all this chain of interceptors, servlet, Jax-Rs, CDI, and we can put them, in priority 1 and 10 and 100. Unfortunately, it's not as integrated, but that was another idea for the future of Java EE.
Yeah, seems cool enough. I mean, something that's really useful to have. Ivan?
Yeah.
What else do you have?
Don't we have questions from our audience?
We do have, but actually, we have about JPA. So.
Okay. Oh God, that was long time ago.
Yeah, but I mean, since it is the last session,
shoot it.
We can make like a small detour. So Ijan is asking about JPA. What's the best way to implement equals and hashcode for a JPA entity that uses auto-generated primary key? Since by definition the value of the primary key will not be known until after the entity is persisted.
Oh my God. Equals and hashcode. You know what I found? There's a project on GitHub called equals verifier, I think. And I've introduced that on a project. You have to introduce it at a very early stage of the project. Basically, it's a framework to test that your equals and hashcode are good. It's so complex to have a decent equals and hashcode that now we even have frameworks that help us to test that. So the rule of thumb, you can read days and days of blogs and forums and how to implement a good equals and hashcode in JPA. Answer number one, find a business key. Easy to write on a blog, very difficult to do on a day-to-day basis. Then you have don't rely on the ID. Very easy to write on a blog, again, not always easy to do. There is a technique that I've used a long time ago, which was quite interesting, is in the constructor of the entity. So when you do a new of the object, the problem is you don't have the ID. But in the constructor, we would create a UUID and store it in the database. And so every object, as soon as you do a new of your entity, it would have a UUID. And this is then stored in the database, and your equals and hashcode is just on this attribute. But again, there's some side effects. So really, we have to come back to try to find a business key, and when it's not possible, try to do your best. And then I recommend this framework, which is equals verifier, and in your tests, you just test the equals and the hashcode of all your entities and DTOs if you have, objects that are supposed to be stored in a map or in a set. But it's a very complex thing to do. It's funny.
Oh, awesome. I was not aware about that equals and hashcode verifier.
Yeah, it's quite a nice, it's on GitHub, very easy. Yeah. You just, take your entity or DTO or object and you say, test it. And it goes through all, algorithms, creates duplicate objects and tests them, etc., etc. It's quite a nice framework. But you have to put it at a very early stage of a project, so otherwise it breaks everything.
Yeah.
It's quite funny, but when you leave the defaults, you start the project and you go no equals and no hashcode, and I leave the Java objects to do it. After a few months, you have plenty of entities, and then you have plenty of bugs. And you know that to solve this bug, the good thing to do is create good equals and hashcode. And then you introduce this framework in your tests, and it breaks all the time. So it's very important to do it at a very early stage, because after hundreds of objects and entities, introducing equals and hashcode, it's a tough job.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, so there's an awesome tip about Antonio. Check out that GitHub project called Entity Verifier. Oh no, Equals Verifier. Is that the name?
Yes.
I can tweet about that. I was mostly excited with the ETH13 JavaScript project that I found on GitHub. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but
no.
Yeah, it's like a JavaScript with like I don't know how many thousands of lines they have, but it kind of allows you to tell if something is 13 in JavaScript.
in different languages.
Yeah, it has I like under dependencies or something.
Project, the 5 project.
Awesome. Yes, this was just like a small joke. Sorry about that. Yeah. But I couldn't resist. Yeah. So.
Another question.
Well, I'll search the link so I can tweet to our audience. Ivan, okay. Can ask the next question.
The next question. Yeah, well, while we are still at JPA and at IDs, I was wondering if an entity, an object, has some kind of natural ID. For example, a person, an employee, has his ID card, his passport, which is yeah, guaranteed to be unique. Well, maybe not the best example, but anyway, because you can change your passport. But anyway, so if an entity has a unique attribute that is guaranteed to be the identifier of this entity, would you still prefer adding an ID attribute that is created by either by database or by your code, or you would keep that natural identifier?
Yes, because as you said, it might change. You know, another common example is the email address. An email address is a worldwide unique string. So it's a very nice unique ID. But it's also good to decouple that because, well, first of all, your email address can change, like, you know, the number of the employee, and also we need an ID because a relational database imposes that on us. You know, if you store an object in a relational database, you need a column that is going to be the primary key. So it's a technical problem. We are giving an ID to the database, but we don't give a toss really about this ID. And today, we not only store objects in relational databases, so storing this ID in a relational database makes sense because we must, but in another support, in another kind of NoSQL database, maybe it doesn't make sense. So it's also good to have two different things because you never know.
Okay. Yeah, that's my opinion as well, but I wanted to make sure that, yeah. Any more questions from the IRC?
Yeah, we have one more. So Bijan is asking, and I know that there was like, so he's asking about configuration. I know there was like a spec around it, but his question is, what's the recommended best practice for using configuration in Java EE applications, considering there is no spec that addresses that issue on Java EE today? So how we can flexibly load configuration from various properties files or something else, considering that Spring already does that without pretty much writing any code. So how are you doing it today, Antonio?
Well, I'm actually doing with the Delta Spike extension, which is, I don't know, you know, I'm not a Spring expert, but I've played with the profiles in Spring, you know, etc. I don't know how far it goes, but the CDI extension even uses stages, so you can configure your application in development, test, QA, production. So it also introduces stages. The configuration in Java EE is a pain. There was this idea of a Java management specification. Well, configuration, unfortunately, it's dead. You know, it was proposed as a JSR, and the EC voted against it. Don't really know why. So unfortunately, it's not even happening in Java EE 8. It's happening in the open source world. So we might come back in Java EE 9. So the official response of Java EE is use JNDI. Woohoo! And because it's a real pain and we don't want to do that, I've also seen projects using Spring config, but if you are full Java EE, the best is to use the CDI extension. So you go to Delta Spike, it's an Apache project, and you have the configuration extension. It's really good. It's really good. You externalize stuff. It injects the values in your attributes. You have this this staging thing. You can say first the configuration is in a property file, and then it can be overridden by this and then by that. It can be inside my jar, it can be outside. So it's very flexible and powerful. So if you use Java EE, take a look at Delta Spike extension.
Okay. I think there was, maybe I'm mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that you're aware of it, since Antoine is a very good friend of yours. Didn't he was working on like Sabot or something that was doing some configuration stuff? Do you have a project for GitHub for that or something like that?
No, I don't know, but it was really the Red Hat guys contribute a lot to the Delta Spike. So I can't remember if Antoine had one thing like that. I know that he was working on Wagorava, which is a framework for integrating Twitter, Facebook, and all these social things. And I know there was a configuration thing. So I don't know if he took it out to contribute it back to Delta Spike, but basically the CDI guys and the Red Hat guys contribute a lot to Delta Spike.
Awesome. Ivan? Ivan? Oh, we cannot hear you.
Sorry.
Okay.
When you mentioned Delta Spike, are there any other extensions from Delta Spike that you use in your projects more than?
Yeah, there's one that I find quite nice. It's the data module. So again, if you are used to the Spring world, Spring has this thing called Spring Data. Yeah, Spring Data.
Yeah.
And basically it's the same idea, using a CDI extension. So you can go add query on a method, and it creates, and you can pass a JPA QL query, or you can create an interface, and it will automatically create JPQL, etc., etc. So this one is quite nice. If you do a lot of JPA, and if you are in the Java EE world, also have a look at the data module. I don't remember his name. I think it's data module in Delta Spike. Really handy. And also something good in Delta Spike is the scheduler. Because if in Java EE you want to say, oh, Wednesday at 3 p.m. do this task, the only answer is use an EJB. That's the only way to use an add schedule. So the Delta Spike has an extension where you can use this add schedule, or sort of, in any bin. So you don't have to have an EJB. So scheduler, data module configuration, these are the three main things of Delta Spike. Plus, there's plenty of APIs and extension, but these three are very, very handy.
Oh, awesome. I wrote some code before on some other projects where I was combining some of the Delta Spike stuff plus Lombok, and your code gets very, very short. But for some reason, it's not that I don't like it. I like it personally, but when sometimes you're working with other teams, it might be sometimes trickier for those people to understand, like, all the magic that's going around there, right? Because you're not seeing anything, any implementation of anything there. So
plus, when you start having bugs, you realize that letting Lombok create equals and hashcode in your entity is not a good idea. letting Lombok creating the toString. In some cases, it's not a good idea either, because if you have an entity A that points to a B that points to a C, well, you can have performance issues, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you will have to. I always do like override the equals and hashcode. Even using the Lombok annotations, I'll just pass whatever parameters I want for Lombok to generate. But yeah, I even like people, I've done that plenty of times, like doing like the plain IDE to string override. It's enough for like rack a JPA application.
yeah. So, at the end of the day, what would you use in Lombok? Getters and setters? Buff, and IDEs can do it like that. The toString equals hashcode can have an impact. Even the getters and setters, but
for Lombok, the one that I love the most is the builder, to be honest.
Yeah, I prefer the step builder doing it on my own. It's a lot of work, but a step builder is really nice. You go A and B and C. With a builder, you can go A, B, 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 C, A. A step builder is a bit more tricky, but it's really nice design pattern. But that's another thing.
Well, I usually it's just to make it like a simple builder where it's just like instead of like having like a full constructor or having like call all the setters, you just go person and say person dot builder dot name dot address dot whatever, and then in the end dot build.
Yeah, but you can go dot name dot name dot name.
Yeah, I know.
And with the step builder, you can't go dot name dot name dot name. But it's a very complex. There's a lot of code.
Yeah, I know. So it's just a personal liking, I guess. So let's see. There is no RC clean for now. Ivan, do you have something more for us?
Yeah, maybe we can wrap it up. I have some concluding questions.
Awesome.
So now after we went through all the chapters from your excellent book.
Excellent.
Excellent.
If I ask you to write a brand new Java web application, which combination of specs and even technology stack would you use for that greenfield project?
CDI, Jax-Rs, and JPA. Really, that's the three that, I would, even the transaction, sometimes you don't need it. Even JTA sometimes can be ignored. CDI because it gives you all the extension model. JPA because in 98% of what I do is more than enough, and Jax-Rs because it's the way to go. Yeah, I think, when I start something, the CDI plus Jax-Rs plus JPA would be the three main ones. Yeah.
AJB is dead.
What about? Yeah, okay.
Huh?
What?
What did you
go
say?
on, answer your question and I'll ask mine.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, it's not that the EJB is dead. The EJB, as I said, it's a fantastic spec. It was created nearly 20 years ago, and with everything in place, transaction, and very quickly the JMS part of it. With Colba, even if we don't like it, but it was the interoperability thing at the time. So it's a fantastic spec. It's just we packed all the services in one single spec. Now the idea is to extract these services out. And when I was saying, CDI plus Jax-Rs plus JPA and maybe JTA or not, It's because since Java EE 7, we have an annotation called @transactional that we can use on a CDI bin rather than an EJB. So the problem with the EJB is just there's too many services at one place. But otherwise, it's a fantastic spec. But no, I would not use it. I would prefer to pick up the services I need, and even if I need a scheduler, I will not trigger the EJB spec. I will use the CDI extension. So even if I need a scheduler, there's a couple of other things I can't remember now that were extracted from the EJB and put as an extension in CDI Apache Delta Spike. I would rather use that.
Okay.
And you didn't mention anything about the front end.
Oh my God! I leave the guys to do the front end. To be honest, in 2016, when I arrive in a project, and if I try to push JSF, I know that I have a lot of chances to lose a battle. Plus, I'm very bad at UI. So even if I push JSF, I will not be the one doing the web pages. Otherwise, they're going to look ugly. So today, it's very difficult to push such spec in the UI. I'm really confident with JSF. I can do some amazing things, very, very stateful, so very complex to do with just the stateless things. But I will not push it. I think it will be something that would have to come out of the team. And the team today is very fragmented in the JS world. So I would let the team fight, and they will come with a JS framework that will disappear in a couple of years, but that's another story.
Okay, so yeah, saying that you prefer Jax-Rs, and it's more than obvious that you will use, or your team actually will most probably use JavaScript framework to the. Okay, I'll not ask you about which, because it's not part of
in a very personal point of view, but that's just me talking. I've actually started to work more and more with Angular 2. It's very nice. I can do some things, which is, I'm not a very UI guy. So when I can do a UI that works, I'm always, happy about me. I think clearly because they left the JS world. I still don't know why the JavaScript language is such a hype. It's there because it's in all the browsers, but it's so ugly. Why would you put that on the server side? But that's just my personal point of view. And TypeScript, actually it's easier for me to read it, to write it, and so I'm gonna actually have a look at that more and more, and maybe try to push it, Angular 2, because it's not JS.
Yes, and well, the only thing that you might risk is like breaking yourself an app if someone just goes to the node repo and just delete their libraries or something.
That's another story.
Yeah. Well, I have another question here on that's we're wrapping up, but I still want to make the last question here on the RC. So the question is, what's about your opinion about the domain objects? Do you prefer objects with simple getters and setters and validation as a separate step, or do you prefer objects that are always in consistent state? So we can create some issues with frameworks that binds to JSON or North structure and so on. So basically, it's a question about consistency or convenience.
I think what I like the most with Java EE is the choices. I know we talked about that before, but I can do a Jax-Rs service, and it returned my entity. Good. I can do it. That allows me to go very, very quickly and to create a proof of concept and show some code. On the real life, I tend to create another layer and return a response. Same thing, I'm very, very happy that in an entity, I can put some business logic. But I'm also happy to be able to have kind of unmutable entities or objects. There are some cases where you don't want to have setters. You want to bring more immutability. So it really depends. I think with Java EE, we have a lot of tools. It can be confusing because there's a lot of choices. People get very passionate about these choices. So people will tell you anemic objects are not good, and people will tell you yes, and for different reasons they are both right. So I'm happy to be able in some cases to put some business logic in my entities, and in some cases I also have some tricks to make my entities kind of unmutable. You can't with an entity, but because there's technical problems. But so have your entity like anemic object. So there's no right and wrong. I think that's the entire thing with Java EE and even with Java. There's not right or wrong answer. There's the right answer at the right time with the right environment with the right constraints.
Yeah, I agree. Ivan, you had some other things, right?
Yeah, I have one final question. You don't have chapters on some significant new additions to Java EE, at least for me, to Java 7, like WebSockets and Batch, for example. What's the reason for not adding them to your book? Do you consider them not so significant, maybe?
There's several reasons why it's not in my book, but to be honest, the first reason, reason number one, timing. We are talking about two brand new specs, 1.0, and I didn't follow them from scratch. It's not like, hey, I'm an expert in EJB 3.1, and I'm gonna have a look at the diff. What were the changes in 3.2? So the first reason was timing. When I started to look at WebSockets and Batch, it was a bit late, and I didn't want to put bad things in my book. There was I even talked to A-Press at the time. We were talking to each other. Now we simply ignore each other. But at the time, I even talked to A-Press and proposed them a second edition of the book. And the edition I wanted to add Batch. The second reason is I really find the Batch API not nice at all. I don't know why they did that. Everything takes an object, everything returns an object, and it's really I think, ugly API, and it's there to stay. I've heard that in Batch 1.1 they're gonna type them they method. Yeah, but they're gonna have to duplicate it, and so the API of Batch 1.0, when I started to have a look at it, it wasn't appealing. I just didn't want to use it. And so that's for Batch. And for WebSockets, I have another problem. I don't see, I haven't come across with a real use case. I see server-side events, yes. The server sends events. There's plenty of use cases like that. But each time I read a blog about WebSocket. I go to a conference about the WebSocket. I read books about WebSockets. It's the bloody chat. How many chat applications do I write at my customers? So I think that I haven't had something that triggered me and saying, "Wow, WebSockets, that's the right tool. I'm so excited about it that I'm going to write about it." No, I would rather write on server-side events.
Well, even if you need to write the chat now, you can write about like 6 lines, so you don't take you too much time to write it. So using the WebSocket side. Yeah, so regarding the batch stuff, yeah, I feel your pain. I'm also trying to get involved with the spec, so I'll see if I can help on that department.
Plus all the XML, I've heard that they were working on CDI scopes. So having a batch scope, a step scope, a job scope. But it's like the CDI integration is not good. The API takes objects and returns objects. It's like, wow. And I'm sure they use vector. Ooh.
No, I don't remember if they use vector. I don't think so. But yeah, the object was because if you look into the mailing list, it was because they ran out of time. So hopefully that will be fixed.
Well, Ivan was talking about his meeting about JCache.
Yeah.
JCache is the JSR that took a bit of time. And
how many years? 20? Oh no, 20 is how many?
15 at least.
18. But, it's like Java younger brother.
So I think, as I said, it's better to take your time rather than introducing something too quick. The entire idea of not putting Jax-Rs in the web profile at the beginning seems now like a bad decision. But it was more not to introduce something that we could not take out. And I always hear that the batch expert group didn't have time. Well, make it for next version, but do not introduce an API that is going to be a pain to use.
Well, that's what I read on the mailing list, so I'm not sure if that was a problem. Anyhow, so we are pretty much done. I do have 2 questions left for Antonio. Yeah, his book. Please buy it. So the first question will be, I'm not sure what's the order I'm going to use. So, but the first question I'll ask Antonio is, let's imagine you're the king for the day for Oracle, and you can do wherever you want. So what will you change on Java EE world if you had the power to do it like right now?
Well, if I had the power to do it, I would put more resources on each spec. I would certainly put more resources on the implementation. I'm a former BEA systems guy, so it really hurts me, but WebLogic is definitely not the best app server out there today. If you do not shrink it, that's going to be a real problem to have microservices running on WebLogic. So I would put more resources everywhere. And I know people are going to hate that, but I will introduce more rules in the JCP to make things slightly more vertical. So at the moment, there's the Java EE expert group sitting on top, and that's it. You sit on top of nothing. Mm-hmm. So we have cases where one spec does not integrate well with another spec. And so I would put the Java EE expert group on top of there and saying, now guys, you are the architects. Make sure all these specs work together well, integrate well, have the same wording, have the same, in one API you use factory, on the other one you use the builder on the other ones. You know, let's go the same direction. And one thing would be, I've proposed that to the JCP many years ago. Each spec lead should be part of the EE expert group, which is not the case now. So there's one spec sitting there doing their thing, and they don't even know what's happening on the EE expert group. And the EE expert group doesn't even know what's happening down there. And one day they have to integrate and work together. And sometimes, you know. So if I was the king of all, you know, Oracle, I would stop buying boats because I'm seasick. So I would just take the millions of the boats and put them on humans that work on spec, on implementation, and in the community. You know, I would spend a few millions out there promoting adopt a JSR, adopt, you know, the community is important. So I will definitely use less boats and more brain power. There's
Awesome.
plenty of brain power out there.
I'll support King Antonio's Oracle. So let's start the movement. Support King Antonio's Oracle.
Less boats, more Java. Less boats, more Java.
Yes. So I'm guessing that we also talk about a little bit about the second question I was going to ask you, and how do you see the future of Java EE then?
Oh my God, do I really have to answer?
Well, make it quick if you don't want to answer that.
I'm not the king, and it looks like the king is buying boats. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Okay. Seems a reasonable question then, a reasonable answer actually.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, guys. I guess we are out of time today. So first of all, I'd like to thank Antonio so much for being with us all these 4 sessions. We had a blast and it was very fun. I think this last session was the most funny one that we had. Maybe it's because we're not talking about it, but that's how I remember at least. And also I want to thank Ivan for preparing the questions that he has to ask Antonio and so on, and of course all the audience that is supporting us and actually wasting their time hearing us. So,
and thank yourself as well.
Thank you so much, guys. And we have some announcement. I don't know, Ivan, do you want to announce our next thing, or we do it later?
Yeah, let's do it later.
Okay, so we already have a lineup of stuff for the Book Reading Club next, but we'll announce it later. So please stay tuned to the virtualjug.com plus the meetup webpage and the email. We'll get something over there. And once again, thank you so much for watching, guys, and see you next time.
Thanks to VJug. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, guys and girls.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.